Yes, unfortunately Paul couldn't do it today, he got called away urgently, but I'm taking his presentation. It's something actually Paul and I have been working on for a number of years. Oh, okay. Actually, it's a shame Paul didn't get here because he's a really interesting guy. His background is in effectively through ASOC in the 1970s. Australia was the first nation in the world that was actually doing equity crowdfunding. And it was sort of something that slipped through, and Paul was running that organisation. So by the time equity crowdfunding hit the world, he was seen as a sort of a world leader in governance of that, because when he was running ASOC, they managed to do that number of raises and there's no fraud. Because this is the big thing about once we're looking at the new financial markets, how do you get the accountability and management of it? So he was sort of touring the world helping a lot of the legislation. So in that way, it's a typical Australian thing, we're sort of innovating, but none of us realise it and all the skills go overseas. But collaborative funding is really interesting, and why I was drawn to connecting with Paul about 5 years ago is that I work a lot of place-based public asset improvement catalyst projects where you'll have public money trying to seed economic activity, but you're trying to do it in a way where you're strengthening community, the environment and place, so there's all these things happening. And since the GFC, government's saying, well, we want more private sector partnerships, and it's a really interesting challenge that we've actually been working a very narrow model, that we've sort of say, well, there's government money and there's big corporate money, and all the rest of us are out of the loop. But the notion of collaborative funding is really that, as there is sort of people-powered finance. And with really the emergence of social media and that, it's really a changed world that gives us a new opportunity to rethink our old sort of financing structures. Because the collaborative funding growth there, you can see that's up to $34 billion. And there's an interesting breakdown from whether it's donation, rewards, lending, or equity. So we're in the shift that this area of financing, which is additional to the area that even Rich has talked about at the larger scale, this at the people level, there's a whole lot of money being allocated to ideas and opportunities. And from crowdsourcing, you could say it started, then we went into sort of crowdfunding. And what we're talking about now is collaborative funding, because crowdfunding was an idea, often was a donation, where you might purchase something or get a t-shirt, sort of that cause approach. But if you take that a bit further, there's a whole structure there that really can provide some of the seed money for ideas that then can scale to a different level. As Paul often tells a story, what's really happened is our financial markets emerged around the industrial economy, where there was a lot of wealthy individuals that were able to pool money to actually develop railways and other aspects, and it's sort of created a centralised financial system. So we ended up with the notion of investment bankers, institutions, private equity, where everything is concentrated and you needed permission to play by there's certain rules to access that money. But really what's happened with the internet is two things that really have happened that have created this great opportunity of disruption. Is that firstly the internet came along, which enabled everything people to connect and share. And then the other thing is this cultural disruption about people's desire to be more meaningfully connected, to want to know where their money's going, want to be engaged in great ideas and projects. And the emergence even of blockchain tracking source of product, that's important to consumers now. And with the internet, the power has been given back to the people, whether it's through social media side of it, the connection, that actually corporations now have to listen, have to be accountable, governments have to be. So our institutional structures are really being challenged. They're struggling with that, how to deal with it. But the way that's really disrupted the financial market has created this interesting way of connecting people to causes. So there's a lot of platforms that have emerged, and you can see from what could be just the basic way of fundraising, right through what was when the ASOC approach with actually getting equity capital from like-minded individuals into investable businesses. And other areas we work with Paul talking about a collaborative management platform that actually is more structured around how do we start with those government-funded projects and look at sort of scaling bigger and more dynamic investment linkages into those, rather than just saying there's government money and we're looking for corporate investors to be the other partner. It's really looking at giving access to a whole lot of passionate people. And one of the reasons I was really drawn to the emergence of this sort of financial opportunity is that when Paul tells the story about the aspects of what actually from his experience enabled ideas to raise money, the sort of 4 ingredients he says any idea needs to have, he said, initially you've really got to have a convincing, compelling, credible story. And everything you say is about the story, the credibility of it, that is meaningful. So if you've got an idea, and of course something like the reef and that is one of those really sexy, great stories, and they're things that you say, well, that's already a good start, depending on what you're building around it. And then it is about the team, and it's not just the technical expertise of the team. People want to know the person, they want to be passionate, they want to be likeable. Investors are looking at a relationship. And of course, there's got to be a lot of already supporters and some traction around the idea, so people are looking at not only the story, not only the team and confidence of delivering it, but has it got some traction? And we're listening to the Coral Vita story this morning. It's that sort of engaging story of traction and success that draws you in, it builds a momentum. And then of course, looking at a way there might be a platform that actually has that accountability and credibility that again, a bit of the thread of a number of the comments today is that third party, that like whether it's the NGO, that someone standing out there that actually can manage and control ethically that money, because we don't, the private sector doesn't trust government, government doesn't trust some of the sort of private sector, the community sort of really wanting transparency. We need to provide that platform that has that integrity and independence. And as Paul often says, depending on the size of the group, it might be just getting investors on a small scale or a large scale of investors. And again, coming through the notion that if we're looking at raising capital, and how do we build the business case that can engage with all different sorts of capital, in the sense that there might be just advocates or influencers, the people might be place investors. The work I've often done when we're looking at developing the business cases for catalyst projects, that often there's government seed money. And when you're working closely at a place-based level and you're wanting to engage the community, what I found interesting was we would have great consultation, you're dealing with values, you've got a lot of passion, people want the change to happen, but they're actually locked out of investing money. Just really think about it. They do all this consultation, they all want everything involved, and then the only funding pathways is government money or some corporate partner that's way over here. Why in the old days, where before the sort of centralisation of finance, communities got together and put money in to build a local bridge or whatever, there was this co-op approach. And what these platforms now allow is rediscovering the fact that local communities can actually invest in different ways into projects that are meaningful where they live. And it's not just about donation. This is the exciting thing of the models that I think all speakers have been talking about. It's really an investable business case. And I think this sort of approach, we're really looking at probably building or developing an ecosystem of investment structures that go from gathering at the place level and the passion, connecting to these other streams, even global of interest, but and everything that Rich said earlier, the ability to scale at that next stage. But starting down at the base, I think we need better platforms to allow locals, people, to invest in those initial startup ideas, be part of it, because they want it. They really do. There's so much untapped finance available to look at that sort of collaborative platform. There's different ways, and I've been talking to Paul about different ways we actually structure the business cases online, how you structure it, and really, in some ways, turns our traditional government-funded approaches right on the head about looking for independent platforms, looking at ways you can break down a project to allow local investment in it. And it's all about storytelling, it's all about, and you can see some of the speakers today was talking about social media, getting that out there, using the internet for connection. It's really, those sort of things have been so disrupted in the financial markets. And I think there's a huge opportunity for local passion and interest, because people do want to be more meaningfully engaged and change and help finance that. So I think that's a great opportunity. But what